Hi everyone, welcome back. Now that we understand the basic structure of MCP, what is MCP client and what is MCP server, and their difference with the traditional APIs, today we will be digging deeper on the MCP landscape and we'll try to understand the architecture of it. We'll also try to understand what happens behind the scenes on the client side and what happens behind the scene on the server side. So, we know that with MCP we have MCP client and we have MCP servers. Okay, so let's try to see what client contains and what server does. Client is someone where intelligence lives. All those decision makings happens in the client side, whereas server is the part where execution happens. Execution happens. Okay, so to summarize, client contains the LLM model. The first and most important thing is the LLM. LLM is responsible for all the decisions happens on the client's end. So typically users will write their instruction in the plain English. Okay, so they'll write in plain English like create a new account or create a new user or create a new contact with this name and all those plain English. The LLM model reads all the description given on the tools on the server side and then understand the user's intent, whatever plain English is written by user, understand the intent of that, what user is trying to do, decides which tool to call and what parameters to send. Everything is done by the LLM model. So every intelligent decision happens here. So LLM is the heart of all the decision making on the client side. MCP client has conversational memory. What do I mean here is full history of every message and every tool results is stored on the client side. The client always remembers, server never does. So client will store the history, whereas in server you will not be able to see the previous history. Server will always forget the moment it provides the response. So client has the conversational memory. You can ask a question related to the previous call and client will be able to answer that as well. Okay, client contains the copy of tool catalog. Okay, when I say tool catalog, every time a client connects with the server, it receives the list of tools available on the server side. Tools are nothing but the group of services provided by the server or provided by the tool, like Salesforce. All the services which Salesforce is ready to provide and has put in the MCP server will be given as a tool list. Okay, and then this client contains all those tools, copy of all those tools catalog. Okay, so that every time it will be able to traverse through all the tools available in the catalog, and it will be easier for LLM model to identify which tool or which service will be usable for this particular user's instruction or this particular user's request. Okay, and then the last and the most important part is the user interface. User interface is something where user will put the plain English text like cloud desktop or like cursor, where user can provide plain English text and then LLM model will read that, will decrypt that and will try to understand which tool to call for this particular instruction. So that's what we have on the client side. On the server side, what do we have? We have tool catalog, source of truth. Tool catalog is nothing but the source of truth. This is the master lists of every tool available on the server. Name, description, parameters, schemas, everything related to a particular service is available inside this master list of tool catalog. And this is shared with MCP clients at the time of connection and every time a new connection is formed. Okay, so client will be able to get the list of all the tools available. That's pretty much the first step of every communication. Then the most important part is authentication. Server validates the OAuth token, and typically it happens on every call before anything runs. So authentication is the first step, like validating the auth token is the first step on every call. Invalid parameter or missing parameters will get rejected immediately. All right, so authentication will be done by the server. Then tool execution. If authentication and everything is fine, then the execution part will happen. It will run the tool execution exactly as instructed by the Salesforce. It will go and call the Salesforce. So MCP server is not Salesforce. MCP server is a server where Salesforce has put their services. When authentication is alright, then MCP server will send that request to Salesforce and will get the result and send back the raw data to the client. MCP server is not the Salesforce. Always remember that. Tool execution will send the call to Salesforce, will get the things executed as per whichever tool we are calling, and then will send the raw data back to your client. And very important part for you to remember is that it has no memory. Okay, so server forgets every call. The moment it returns the result, it will forget about that call. Okay, that this approach keeps the server simple, stateless, and scalable. Okay, now I've been talking about tools and all the time. Sometimes because we haven't done any demo, it will be very confusing for students to go through and understand what is tool. So let me try to show you. Let me log into Salesforce and try to show you when I say tool, what do I really actually mean. So we'll log into our Salesforce org. We'll try to go to setup first, and then from there we'll be able to see MCP servers. Okay, just a second, just allow us. All right, here let's just type MCP, and inside the API catalog you'll be able to see MCP server. Here you will see external servers and Salesforce server. Just click on Salesforce servers, and this is nothing but a tool. Okay, so Salesforce has categorized their services into multiple different servers, you can say. So for S object all, this is a different server. It has 11 different tools. So if I click on this, tool is nothing but a service. Okay, so this tool MCP S object all will have 11 tools. Okay, and as I said, tool is nothing but a service. If you want to get the related records, you can call this particular service, or you can call this particular tool. If you want to recently view record, you can call this tool. If you want to do the query, you can call this particular tool. So tool is nothing but the service which is packaged under a particular MCP server, and Salesforce has provided their service across multiple servers. You will have an option to activate those servers. If you want to activate for S object all, you have to activate this server, and all the services or all the tools inside this will be active for you to be able to use. Okay, and similarly there are other services related to data cloud, related to metadata, related to S object, related to delete. So it depends on what you really want to do, and then you decide which server to enable, and then ultimately you will be deciding which tool to. So let's say if you just enable this particular server, then when you make a connection with Claude, then only this particular server will be available in the list of all the tool. So tool catalog will only have this server because you have only enabled this server. Okay, and then only the tools inside this particular server will be available for Claude to be able to use. So let's say if you go to this one, and if you see here, there are multiple tools. Let's try to click on one. This is nothing but the description of this particular tool. Claude will read the description and will try to understand what this is doing. It will also be able to understand the input schema, so that if Claude decides that okay, this is the tool we need to call, then in that case they already have the input schema. Claude will try to build that input schema for Salesforce. Okay, so this is the tool and server analogy. Don't worry about it, we will activate it once we actually set up those things on the Salesforce side, but this was just to tell you that what is tool versus what is service, and where you will be able to see all those in the Salesforce screen. Okay, coming back to our example, MCP client and MCP server. Now let's try to understand this with the help of one example, because all we are talking about is the theory, and it is very important that we talk about example, how it works. So let's say we again have a client here and server here, and we'll be doing different steps. Okay, so let's say our input statement is create a contact in Salesforce Rahul Sharma. Okay, works at ABC Corp, email ID xyz@gmail. Okay, so this is our plain English statement. Now, sorry, let me just. So here is our client. Sometimes this pen behave weirdly. We have client and we have server, and our input statement is that create a contact in Salesforce, name Rahul Sharma. Okay, company name ABC, and email ID XYZ, whatever. Okay, don't worry about the details of it. Now how this will happen? So step 1. In step 1, user will give an instruction on the plain English on your client UI machine. Okay, maybe cloud desktop or ChatGPT, wherever you want to. Okay, so MCP client receives plain text. Now here LLM model will takes over. Model will read this plain English. Okay, and based on that it will search through the list of tool catalog, will do the decision making on which tool to call, create the schema for that, or you can say the input package for that, and then LLM model will construct the full call. So what all happening here? First, client will receive the plain English, then LLM model will try to traverse through tool catalog, all the tools, will read the description of all those tools, and based on that it will try to identify which tool is suitable for this kind of input request. Once it identifies the tool, it will try to create the input schema for that, and then it will send that call to MCP server. Okay, so far here server is idle. Server will not know anything about it. Okay, server is idle. It has already sent the tool catalog, and it is not doing anything until it receives a call. So in the first step, client will just create will try to do that decision making on which tool to call and create the input param for that. Okay, now in the step 2, client sends the call and server takes over. Now here client's job is done because it has already done all those decision making and provided the input and everything, and will call the MCP server. Now the heavy lifting will be done on the server side. Server side will do all the checks. Is user authenticated? Does profile allow creation? FLS, all those things will be checked here, right? And if all passes, then MCP server will send the request to Salesforce. Okay, now because MCP server has has already forwarded that request to Salesforce, the execution will happen. Step 4, execution will happen on Salesforce. Contact will get created. Client will be idle on this step. Then comes the step 5. Okay, now in step 5, server will send the raw response to client and forget about this call. So server will now send the response, raw response, no formatting, no anything, raw response to client, and server will now forget about anything whatsoever has happened here. It will forget everything. Now client will get the raw response here. So LLM model, LLM will convert raw response into human readable text. Okay, it also stores the contact ID plus full context of this conversation for future reference. Okay, so that if in case you ask any follow-up question later on, what is the what is the contact ID of the recently created contact, your client will be able to provide you that. Okay, so I have done a lot of things here in this very badly written handwriting. Don't worry about it. When I provide you my notes, you'll get the whole each of this step written in proper plain English, and then don't worry about this. The intention was to explain you what are the things happens on the client end and what all things happens on the server end. I don't expect you to understand each and everything fully without actually doing the whole demo or without actually doing it on Salesforce screen, but it was just to tell you that how the architecture work and how and what responsibilities will be taken by the client versus what server will be taking care. All right, so I think we have got the good enough basics on this. Now it is time for us to do all the setup related thing on the Salesforce and on the clients end, and then try to see how it actually works in the real time. So that will be done in the next video. Thank you everyone.